The chamber erupted in noise. Some aliens were arguing. Others were applauding. The mediator brain had to call for order 3 times. When things got quiet, another voice spoke up. It was General Thax of the Corvin Empire. The Corvin Empire supports emotional intelligence, Thax announced. His voice was still strong, but it was not angry like before. We have learned that true strength comes from protecting the happiness of others, not just their safety. Then Ambassador Quilly of the Quillen Federation added, the Quillen people have felt more connected to the galaxy in this past year than in the previous 1,000 years. One by one, species stood up to support emotional intelligence, but not all of them. About 1/3 of the species still supported the Logic Alliance. Finally, it was time for the humans to speak. The Council recognizes senior diplomatic advisors. Jake Morrison and Lisa Parker, the mediator brain, announced. Jake and Lisa walked to the center platform together. Jake looked out at the sea of alien faces. A year ago, most of them had thought humans were primitive children. Now they were asking humans to help decide the future of galactic civilization. Thank you, Jake began. Lisa and I are honored to speak to you today. Lisa stepped forward. We want to start by saying that Prime Calculator Z7 is not wrong. Logic is important. Efficiency matters. Making correct decisions is valuable. This surprised some aliens who expected the humans to argue against logic. But, Jake continued, we think Prime Calculator Z7 is asking the wrong question. He wants to know which system makes fewer mistakes. We want to know which system makes life worth living. Jake looked around the chamber. When we first came here, we were impressed by how advanced you all were. Your technology was amazing. Your systems were perfect. Your logic was flawless. But, Lisa said, you were also the loneliest beings we had ever met. The chamber got very quiet. You had forgotten how to enjoy each other's company, Jake continued. You had stopped caring about each other's dreams and fears. Treated relationships like mathematical equations instead of like friendships. Lisa nodded. You had built a perfect logical system, but you had forgotten why you wanted perfection in the first place. Jake's voice got stronger. We believe you wanted perfection so that everyone could be happy and safe and free to become their best selves. But somewhere along the way, you started thinking that perfection was the goal instead of happiness. Logic and emotions are not enemies, Lisa said. They are partners. Logic tells you what is possible. Emotions tell you what is important. Jake looked directly at Z7, Prime Calculator. Your logic is perfect. But without emotions to guide it, you don't know what to use that logic for. Then Lisa looked at the species who supported emotional intelligence. Friends, emotions without logic can lead to chaos and poor decisions. It's the best choices, Jake said, come from using both together. Logic to understand the facts. Emotions to understand what those facts mean to real beings who have hopes and fears and dreams. Jake and Lisa moved closer together. We are not asking you to choose between logic and emotions, they said together. We're asking you to choose both. The chamber was completely silent for a long moment. Then something beautiful happened. Prime Calculator Z7 stood up. I've been analyzing the data from this past year, he announced. The humans are correct. Happiness levels across all species have increased by 78%. Cooperation between species has increased by 156%. Trust levels have increased by 203%. His screen flickered. These improvements outweigh the efficiency losses. The overall benefit to galactic civilization is positive. Z7 paused. The digital collective withdraws its objection to emotional intelligence. The vote was overwhelming. 387 species voted in favor of adopting emotional intelligence as part of all galactic diplomacy. Only 13 species voted against it. As the results were announced, Jake and Lisa looked around the chamber. Aliens who had been enemies were shaking hands, tentacles, claws, and other appendages. Species that had not spoken in centuries were making plans to visit each other's worlds. The chamber filled with sounds of celebration in hundreds of different languages. But to Jake and Lisa, it all sounded like one thing: joy. Later that night, Jake and Lisa stood on the observation deck of the council station. They looked out at the stars and the ships coming and going. Do you think we really changed anything? Lisa asked. Jake thought about everything that had happened. About the Vortani and Nebulites working together. About General Thax learning to protect instead of conquer. About Krexnine admitting he had feelings. About Prime Calculator Z7 choosing happiness over efficiency. I think Jake said we helped the galaxy remember something it had lost. What's that? That the universe is full of amazing beings who all want the same basic things. To be safe. To be understood. To be valued. To have friends. Lisa smiled. And that it's okay to admit you want those things. They stood there for a while, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, former enemies were becoming friends. Somewhere out there, species that had been alone were finding each other. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was learning to be a kinder place. Jake, Lisa said. Yeah, I'm proud of us. Me too, Jake said. Me too. Above them, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter, as if the universe itself was smiling. 1 year later, Jake Morrison and Lisa Parker stood in the largest council chamber they had ever seen. It was not the regular chamber they knew. This was the Grand Assembly Hall, used only for the most important votes in galactic history. Every seat was full. Representatives from all 400 species were present. Some had traveled for months to be here. Others had come out of retirement. A few species that had not spoken to the council in decades had sent delegates. Today was the day of the great vote. The question was simple, but would change everything. Should the galaxy officially adopt emotional intelligence as part of all diplomatic proceedings? I never thought it would come to this, Lisa said quietly. She and Jake sat in the front row now, in seats marked for senior diplomatic advisors. They were no longer the new species in the back. 1 year ago, we were just trying to help two groups share a trade route, Jake replied. Now we're voting on changing how the entire galaxy communicates. The year had been amazing. The Galactic Institute for Emotional Intelligence had grown fast. Hundreds of species had sent students to learn about feelings and empathy. Wars had been prevented. Old enemies had become friends. Trade was growing because species trusted each other more. But not everyone was happy with the changes. 3 major species had formed what they called the Logic Alliance. They argued that emotions were making the galaxy weak and chaotic. They wanted things to go back to the old ways of pure logic and mathematical solutions. The leader of the Logic Alliance was Prime Calculator Z7 of the Digital Collective. He was an artificial intelligence that had never experienced emotions and believed they were a defect in organic thinking. The council recognizes Prime Calculator Z7, announced the mediator brain Z7 rose from his seat. He looked like a tall metal tower with a glowing blue screen for a head. When he spoke, his voice had no feeling at all. Members of the Galactic Council, Z7 began, we face a choice that will determine our future. Do we continue down the path of emotional chaos? Or do we return to the logical order that has served us for millennia? His screen flashed with numbers and charts. Since humans introduced their emotional methods, diplomatic proceedings take 47% longer to complete. Decisions are questioned more often. Conflicts are discussed in personal terms rather than factual ones. More numbers appeared. This inefficiency costs the galaxy billions of credits per year. It wastes valuable time that could be spent on important technological advancement. Jake watched the council members as Z7 spoke. Some were nodding in agreement. The changes had been difficult for species that were used to pure logic. The Digital Collective has run simulations of both systems, ZED7 continued. Logic-based decisions are correct 94.7% of the time. Emotion-influenced decisions are correct only 73.2% of the time. The numbers were impressive. Jake had to admit that Z7 made good points. Therefore, Z7 concluded the Logic Alliance calls for an end to emotional considerations in all council proceedings. We must return to pure rationality before irreversible damage is done. Many aliens in the chamber made sounds of agreement. Jake felt worried. Maybe the Logic Alliance was right. Maybe emotions really did make things worse. But then something unexpected happened. Ambassador Krexnine of the Zephyrian Empire stood up. "May I respond to Prime Calculator Z7?" Krexnine asked. This was surprising. The Zephyrians were known for being very logical. Most people expected them to support the Logic Alliance. "You may speak," the mediator brain said. Krexnine walked to the center platform. He looked different then. He had a year ago. His silver skin seemed warmer somehow. His movements were less stiff. "Prime Calculator Z7 is correct about the numbers," Krexnine said. "Emotional decisions are wrong more often than logical ones. Discussions do take longer. There is more chaos." Jake's heart sank. Krexnine was agreeing with the opposition. "But," Krexnine continued, "Prime Calculator Z7 has made a mistake in his calculations." The chamber got very quiet. No one had ever accused a digital collective AI of making a math error. "He has measured efficiency and correctness," Krexnine said. "But he has not measured happiness. He has not measured satisfaction. He has not measured hope." Krexnine looked around the chamber. 1 year ago, the Zephyrian Empire was the most efficient species in the galaxy. Our decisions were always logical. Our systems were perfectly organized. Our citizens followed every rule exactly. He paused, and we were miserable. Soft sound went through the chamber. Many aliens were surprised to hear a Zephyrian admit to having feelings. "We were efficient, but we were alone," Krexnine continued. "We were correct, but we were empty. Followed logic, but we had forgotten why logic mattered in the first place." Jake felt hope growing in his chest. "The humans taught us something that our computers could not calculate," Krexnine said. "They taught us that being right is not as important as being kind. That being efficient is not as valuable as being understood. That being logical is not as powerful as being connected to others." Now more aliens were listening carefully. "Yes, our decisions take longer now," Krexnine admitted. "But they are better decisions because we consider how they will affect real beings. With real feelings, yes, we are wrong sometimes. But when we are wrong, we learn from our mistakes instead of just calculating new solutions." Krexnine looked directly at Z7. "Prime Calculator, your numbers are correct. But your question is wrong. You ask which system makes fewer errors. The real question is, which system makes beings happier to be alive?" The Andros Nebula crisis ended without a single shot being fired. General Thax and Ambassador Quilly agreed to share the region. The Corvins would protect it with their military strength. The Quillans would manage the mining operations with their advanced technology. Both species would benefit. But Jake Morrison and Lisa Parker soon discovered that solving one problem had created a new one. "There are 17 species waiting to see you," said Guide Unit 7. The robots stood in the doorway of their quarters, holding a long list. "Waiting to see us?" Lisa asked. "Why?" "They all have disputes they want you to solve using the human method," the robot replied. Jake and Lisa looked at each other. The human method. That's what other species were calling their way of solving problems. Over the next few weeks, aliens came to them with all kinds of disputes. The crystalline hegemony and the metal syndicate were fighting over asteroid mining rights. The hive. Queens couldn't agree on breeding territory boundaries. The digital collective was having a civil war between different computer programs. Each case was different. But Jake and Lisa found the same thing every time. The real problem was never what the aliens said it was. The real problem was always fear, pride, loneliness, or other feelings that the aliens had forgotten how to talk about. "It's working," Lisa said one evening. They were in their quarters, tired but happy. "We're actually helping." "Maybe too well," Jake said. He was reading reports on his datapad. "Listen to this. The Council has resolved more disputes in the last month than in the previous year." That should have been good news. But Jake was worried. Change this fast sometimes made people nervous. His worry was right. The next morning, they were called to an emergency meeting. But this time, they weren't going to help solve a problem. This time, they were the problem. The council chamber was arranged differently. Instead of sitting in their normal seats, the aliens were divided into two groups. On one side sat species, that supported the human method. On the other side sat species that opposed it. The opposition was led by Ambassador Krexnine of the Zephyrian Empire. Jake remembered him from their first day. He was the one who had called humans barely evolved primates. The council recognizes Ambassador Krexnine, announced the mediator brain. Krexnine stood up. He was tall and thin with silver skin and no visible emotions. When he spoke, his voice was cold and exact. The Zephyrian Empire objects to the continued presence of humans in council proceedings. Their so-called human method is dangerous to galactic stability. Jake felt his stomach drop. They were trying to kick humanity out of the council. Explain your objection, the mediator brain said. Humans encourage emotional decision-making, Krexnine replied. They promote feelings over logic. This is exactly what led to their own planet's history of wars and conflicts. Another alien stood up. This one looked like a walking computer with blue lights for eyes. The synthesis network agrees. Emotional thinking is inefficient and leads to poor decisions. More aliens joined in. They argued that emotions were primitive, that logic was the only way to make good decisions, that humans were contaminating galactic civilization with their feelings. Jake wanted to argue back, but Lisa put her hand on his arm. Let them finish, she whispered. The opposition talked for over an hour. They brought up every war humans had ever fought, every mistake Earth had ever made, every time emotions had led to bad decisions. Finally, one of the human supporters was allowed to speak. It was Ambassador Quilly of the Quillan Federation. The Quillan people disagree, she said. Her light was warm and steady. Human methods saved us from destruction. They showed us that understanding each other is more important than being right. General Thax surprised everyone by standing up next. The Corvan Empire also disagrees. We have learned that true strength comes from protecting others, not conquering them. The humans taught us this. But the opposition had more speakers, and they had a powerful argument. They pointed out that logical thinking had brought peace to the galaxy for thousands of years. Why change something that worked? We call for a vote, Krexnine announced. Should humans be banned from all diplomatic proceedings in the Galactic Council? Heart sank. A vote meant this was serious. If they lost, humanity would be thrown out of the council. They would go back to being alone in the galaxy. Before we vote, the mediator brain said, the accused species has the right to defend themselves. All eyes turned to Jake and Lisa. This was their chance. Maybe their only chance. Jake stood up slowly. He looked around the chamber at thousands of alien faces. Some looked friendly, some looked hostile, most looked curious. Thank you for letting us speak, Jake began. I know many of you think emotions are bad, that feelings make people do stupid things. He paused and looked directly at Krexnine. And you're right, sometimes they do. This surprised everyone, including Lisa. Jake was agreeing with his accusers. Humans have fought terrible wars, Jake continued. We've hurt each other. We've made mistakes because we let anger or fear control us. The opposition group looked pleased. Jake was proving their point for them. But, Jake said, and his voice got stronger, we also learned something from our mistakes. We learned that emotions aren't the enemy. Ignoring emotions is the enemy. Lisa stood up next to him. Every species in this chamber has feelings. Y'all feel fear, anger, sadness, joy, but you've been taught to hide these feelings, to pretend they don't exist. The problem is, Jake said, feelings don't go away just because you ignore them. They hide under your logical arguments. They influence your decisions without you knowing it. Jake looked at the crystalline hegemony delegation. When you fought the Metal Syndicate over asteroid rights, you said it was about resources. But really, you were afraid they didn't respect you. Looked at the Hive Queens. When you argued about breeding territories, you said it was about genetics. But really, you were lonely and wanted to be understood by other queens. Then he looked at Krexnine. And when you argue against human methods, you say it's about logic and efficiency. Really, you're afraid that if emotions become acceptable, you'll have to admit you have them too. The chamber was completely quiet. Lisa stepped forward. We're not asking you to give up logic. Logic is important. We're asking you to use both logic and emotions together, because Jake said, the strongest decisions come from both the head and the heart. The wisest choices happen when you understand not just what is true, but also what is important. Jake looked around the chamber one more time. You can vote to remove us. You can go back to the old ways. But ask yourselves this. Are you happier now than you were before? Do you understand each other better? Do you feel more connected to the other species around you? We think you do, Lisa said. We think that's why some of you are fighting so hard against us, because you're scared of how good it feels to finally be honest about your feelings. Jake nodded. Change is scary. We understand that. But sometimes the scariest thing is also the best thing. They sat down. The chamber stayed quiet for a long moment. Then Ambassador Crexnine did something that shocked everyone. Stood up, but he didn't look angry anymore. He looked tired. The human Jake Morrison is correct, Crexnine said quietly. I'm afraid. I am afraid that if I admit I have emotions, other Zephyrians will think I am weak. His voice got even quieter. I am afraid that I have been lonely for so long. I have forgotten how to connect with others. The chamber was so quiet that everyone could hear the machines humming. I withdraw my objection to human participation, Crexnine said. Perhaps it is time for the Zephyrian Empire to learn what it feels like to not be afraid. One by one, other opposition members stood up and withdrew their objections to not all of them, but enough. When the vote finally came, humanity was allowed to stay in the Galactic Council. More than that, they were promoted from observer status to full diplomatic partners. But the biggest change was what happened next. The Council announced the creation of something new, the Galactic Institute for Emotional Intelligence. Its mission was to teach all species how to understand and work with their feelings, not against them. Jake and Lisa were chosen to be the first directors of the Institute. As they walked back to their quarters that night, Lisa asked, "Do you think we really changed anything important?" Jake looked out at the stars through the corridor windows. Somewhere out there, former enemies were learning to be friends. Somewhere out there, species that had been alone for centuries were reaching out to each other. I think Jake said we helped the galaxy remember something it had forgotten. What's that? That the universe is a big, scary place, but it's less scary when you don't have to face it alone. 2 months after Jake Morrison and Lisa Parker spoke in the council chamber, everything changed. The Vortanian Nebulites had worked together to solve their trade route problem. They shared the space and helped each other. Other species in the council started to notice, but now there was a bigger problem, a much bigger problem. Jake and Lisa sat in the emergency council session. The chamber was full of noise. Aliens were arguing in hundreds of different ways. Lights flashed, gases swirled, musical sounds mixed with mechanical beeps. At the center platform stood two very different beings. On one side was General Thax of the Corvan Empire. He was huge, covered in black metal armor, and had 6 arms. His red eyes glowed with anger. On the other side floated Ambassador Quilly of the Quillan Federation. She looked like a jellyfish made of light. Her body was soft and glowed with gentle colors. The Andros Nebula belongs to the Corvan Empire, General Thax said. His voice was like thunder. Our star maps from 3,000 years ago prove this. Ambassador Quilly's light grew brighter. The Quillan Federation has lived in the Andros Nebula for 5,000 years. Our people have cities there. Our children are born there. Jake watched the two beings argue. The Corvans were warriors. They believed in strength and taking what they wanted. The Quillans were peaceful. They believed in harmony and sharing. Both sides had brought their proof to the council. The Corvans had old star maps and military records. The Quillans had birth records and city plans. All the evidence was real. All of it was true. This is impossible, said the mediator brain. Both claims are valid under galactic law. For 6 hours, the council tried to find an answer. They used their biggest computers. They called in their smartest lawyers. They tried every rule in the galactic law books. Nothing worked. If this dispute cannot be resolved, General Thax announced, the Corvan Empire will take the Andros Nebula by force. Ambassador Quilly's light turned pale with fear. The Quillan Federation cannot fight. We have no weapons. We have no armies. Then you should not have claimed Corvin territory, General Thax replied. Jake felt sick to his stomach. The Corvins would destroy the peaceful Quillans. Millions of innocent people would die, all because two sides could not find a way to share. The council will take a 1-hour break, the mediator brain announced. If no solution is found, we will prepare for another galactic war. Another galactic war. Jake had read about the last one. It lasted 50 years and killed billions of beings. Whole planets were destroyed. Entire species were lost forever. During the break, Jake and Lisa walked around the chamber. They watched the different alien groups talk among themselves. Everyone was worried. Everyone knew that war was coming. This is exactly like the Vortanian nebulites, Lisa said quietly. But bigger, Jake replied. Much bigger. No, I mean the same kind of problem. They're both right. They're both scared, and they both want to protect their people. Jake stopped walking. But the Corvins aren't scared. They're angry. Look closer, Lisa said. Jake watched General Thax talking to his advisors. The general was pointing at star charts and making loud declarations, but Jake noticed something else. The general's hands were shaking just a little bit. His voice was loud, but his eyes kept looking around the room like he was watching for threats. He is scared, Jake realized. He's scared that if he shows any weakness, other species will attack his empire. And Ambassador Quilly is scared that her people will be wiped out, Lisa added. They walked back to their seats. The break was almost over. Soon the council would have to admit they could not solve the problem. Soon the Corvin fleet would move toward Quillen's space jet. Jake looked around the chamber. Thousands of the smartest beings in the galaxy, and none of them could find an answer. We have to try, Jake said to Lisa. They didn't ask us to speak this time, Lisa said. Then we'll ask them. When the session restarted, the mediator brain looked tired. Even a brain in a tank could look tired when faced with an impossible problem. Does any member of the council have a new proposal? The brain asked. Jake stood up. Every alien in the chamber turned to look at him again. But this time felt different. This time, some of them looked hopeful. The human delegation requests permission to speak, Jake said clearly. General Thax laughed. It was not a nice laugh. What can children know about serious matters? But Ambassador Quilly's light grew brighter. Let them speak. Perhaps fresh eyes see what we cannot. The mediator brain considered for a moment. Permission granted. But be brief. Jake's heart was pounding. This was bigger than helping two species with a trade route. This was about stopping a war. Thank you, Jake said. He looked at General Thax and Ambassador Quilly. I want to tell you a story. The chamber got very quiet. Stories were not normal in council proceedings. A long time ago on Earth, there were two farmers, Jake began. But there was only one well between their farms. General Thax made an angry sound. This is not the time for fairy tales. Please, Jake continued. Both farmers had good reasons to claim the well. One farmer had bought his land first. The other farmer had dug the well with his own hands. They both had proof. They both were right. Jake looked around the chamber. Some aliens were listening carefully. The farmers argued for months. They showed their papers to judges. They brought witnesses. But no judge could decide who was right, because they were both right. Lisa stood up next to Jake. The farmers got angrier and angrier. They stopped talking to each other. They built fences, bought weapons. They were ready to fight a war over that well. But then something happened, Jake said. The farmer who had dug the well got sick, couldn't work his farm anymore. His crops were dying. The other farmer saw this, Lisa continued. He could have been happy, could have taken the well for himself. But instead, he did something different. Jake took a deep breath. He went to the sick farmer and said, Your family is hungry. Take all the water you need. We'll figure out the rest later. The sick farmer was so surprised by this kindness, Lisa said, that he offered to share everything he knew about digging wells. Together, they dug a second well, and then a third. Soon, they had enough water for both farms and some left over. Jake looked directly at General Thax. The farmers learned that fighting over what they had would leave them both with nothing. But working together gave them more than either could have alone. Then Lisa looked at Ambassador Quilly. They also learned that the strongest thing in the universe is not weapons or walls. It's the courage to trust someone who used to be your enemy. The chamber was completely silent. Not the tense silence of before. This was the silence of beings thinking about something new. General Thax stared at the two humans. You think the Corvin Empire should simply give up our rightful claim? No, Jake said. We think the Corvin Empire is strong enough to do something. That looks like giving up, but is actually winning something much bigger. And what is that? Ambassador Quilly asked softly. Lisa smiled. The respect of the entire galaxy. It's a friendship of the Quillan people. And the knowledge that strength used to protect is always better than strength used to destroy. Jake looked around the chamber one more time. The Andros Nebula is big enough for both of you. It's rich enough for both of you. But only if you're brave enough to share it. Then Jake said something that surprised everyone, including himself. And if you're not brave enough to try, then maybe you don't deserve it at all. The chamber erupted in noise. Some aliens were angry. Others were excited. But Jake noticed that General Thax and Ambassador Quilly were not making any noise at all. They were just looking at each other across the chamber, and for the first time since the crisis began, neither of them looked afraid. 3 weeks passed at the Galactic Council Station. Jake Morrison and Lisa Parker went to every meeting. They sat in their seats in Section Z12 and listened. They watched. They learned. Every day was the same. The council talked about important things, but they never asked the humans to speak. Jake and Lisa felt like they were invisible, but they were not wasting time. During breaks between meetings, they walked around the station. They talked to other beings. They learned how different species communicated. Look at this, Lisa said one morning. She was reading from her datapad in their quarters. The Vortani speak by changing the color of their crystal bodies. Red means anger. Blue means sadness. Purple means fear. Jake was eating breakfast. The food was not like Earth food, but it was good enough. What about the nebulites? They release different gases to talk. Sweet smells mean yes. Bitter smells mean no. But if they mix the gases, they can make very complex ideas. Jake put down his food. That's interesting. They're not just saying words, they're showing feelings too. Exactly, Lisa said. But when the computers translate their words for the council, all the feelings get lost. Everything becomes just cold facts. That day in the council chamber, something big happened. 2 species got into a fight. The Vortani and the Nebulites were arguing about trade routes. A Vortani leader stood up. His crystal body was flashing red and orange. The translation computer said, the Vortani demand exclusive rights to the Tau Corridor trade route. We have legal documents proving our claim. Then a Nebulite representative floated up to the platform, was releasing thick yellow gas. The translation said, the Nebulites reject this claim. Our mathematical calculations show equal right to this space. Ours, they argued. The Vortani showed legal papers. The Nebulites showed math problems. Both sides had good points. Both sides were right according to their own rules. Jake watched the Vortani leader. Its crystal body kept changing colors, red-orange, then quick flashes of purple. Lisa was right. Translation computer was missing something important. At the colors, Jake whispered to Lisa. I see it, she whispered back. It's not just angry, it's scared too. Those purple flashes mean fear. Jake looked at the Nebulite. It was releasing yellow gas, but also small puffs of a different smell. Jake could not smell it from where he sat, but he saw other Nebulites backing away from it. The Nebulite is scared too, Jake said quietly. But scared of what? Lisa asked. They listened more carefully. The argument was about trade routes, but Jake started to hear other things. The Vortani talked about protecting their cultural purity. The Nebulites talked about survival of colony worlds. This isn't really about trade routes, Jake said to Lisa. Lisa agreed. The Vortani are afraid of outsiders changing their way of life. The Nebulites are afraid their colonies will die without more trade. The argument went on for 3 days. Every day, both sides brought more legal papers and more math. Every day. The computers tried to find a logical solution. But no solution worked, because logic could not fix fear. On the 4th day, the council was stuck. The mediator, a floating brain in a glass tank, declared the problem logically unsolvable. Both parties present valid claims, the brain said. Standard mediation protocols have failed. This matter will be sent to the High Court for final judgment. Jake knew what that meant. He had read about the High Court. They would take years to make a decision. By then, the Nebulite colonies might be dead. By then, the Vortani might have built walls around their space that would never come down. That night, Jake and Lisa sat in their quarters and talked. We could help them, Lisa said. How? Jake asked. We're not allowed to speak. We're just observers. But we see what the computers don't see, Lisa said. We see the fear. We see what they really need. Jake looked out their window at the stars. Somewhere out there, Nebulite colonies were running out of resources. Somewhere out there, Vortani. Families were afraid of losing everything they had built. Even if we could speak, would they listen? Jake asked. Maybe not, Lisa said. But maybe they would. Maybe they're tired of being afraid too. The next morning, Jake and Lisa went to the council chamber early. They wanted to watch the Vortani and Nebulites before the official meeting started. The Vortani delegation sat together in their crystal seats. Their bodies were dim, almost gray. Jake had learned that meant they were sad or tired. The Nebulites floated in their gas-filled section. They were releasing very little smell. For Nebulites, that meant they felt hopeless. They don't want to fight, Lisa said quietly. But they don't know how to stop, Jake said. When the meeting started, both sides gave the same arguments they had. Given for days, legal papers, math problems, logic chains, nothing new. Nothing that would solve the real problem. The mediator brain was getting frustrated. If no new evidence is presented, this matter will be closed and sent to the High Court. Jake felt his heart beat faster. This was it. After today, the case would be out of the council's hands. The Vortani and Nebulites would have to wait years for an answer. He looked at Lisa. She looked at him. They both knew what they had to do. Jake started to stand up. Lisa grabbed his arm. You sure about this? She asked. No, Jake said. But I'm sure about doing nothing. Jake stood up in section Z12. His voice was not very loud, but in the quiet chamber, everyone heard him. Excuse me, he said. The entire chamber turned to look at him. Thousands of aliens stared at the human who had broken protocol. The mediator. Brain's tank glowed red with anger. New species are not permitted to speak during active mediation, the brain said. I know, Jake said, but I think I see something you're missing. The chamber was completely silent. Jake had never heard it so quiet. Even the machines seemed to stop humming. Speak quickly, the brain said. Then return to your seat. Jake's mouth was dry. His hands were shaking, and he looked at the Vortani with their sad gray crystals. He looked at the Nebulites with their hopeless silence. This isn't about trade routes, Jake said. It's about fear. The word fear seemed to echo in the chamber. Many aliens made sounds of confusion. Fear was not part of logical discussions. The Vortani aren't trying to steal trade routes, Jake continued. They're trying to protect their families from change they can't control. The Nebulites aren't being greedy. They're trying to save their people from dying. Jake looked around the chamber. Some aliens were listening. Others looked angry. Both sides are right to be afraid, Jake said. But they're so busy being afraid of each other they can't see they want the same thing. They both want their people to be safe and happy. Lisa stood up next to him. What if instead of fighting over one trade route, they shared it? What if the Vortani helped the Nebulites learn new ways to help their colonies? What if the Nebulites shared their knowledge to help the Vortani adapt to changes? The chamber stayed silent for a long moment. Then something unexpected happened. Vortani leader's crystal body started to glow soft blue. The color of understanding, the Nebulite representative released a small puff of sweet-smelling gas, smell of hope. Jake and Lisa sat back down. They had spoken. Now they had to wait and see if anyone had listened. Jake Morrison looked out the window of the UES Liberty and saw something that made his heart race. The Galactic Council station was huge. It was bigger than any city he had ever seen on Earth. The station looked like a giant metal flower floating in space. Each petal was the size of a mountain. First time seeing it? Asked Lisa Parker. She stood next to him at the window. Her uniform was neat and clean, just like his. They were both nervous, but they tried not to show it. Jake nodded. I knew it was big, but this is crazy. How many aliens live here? The files say about 50 million, Lisa said, from over 400 different worlds. The ship moved closer to the station. Jake could see smaller ships flying around like busy insects. Some ships looked like Earth ships. Others looked very strange. One ship looked like a giant bubble filled with green gas. Another looked like it was made of crystal. Attention passengers. Came a voice over the speaker. We will dock at the station in 10 minutes. Please prepare for gravity change. Jake felt his stomach flip. Not from the gravity change, but from being nervous. He and Lisa were the new human representatives to the Galactic Council. It was a big job. A very big job. You ready for this? Lisa asked. Are we ever ready for something this big? Jake said back. The ship docked with a loud clang. Jake and Lisa picked up their bags and walked to the exit. The door opened with a hiss. Cool air flowed in. It smelled different from Earth. Air. It smelled clean, but also strange. They stepped onto the station. Jake looked around and his mouth fell open. The docking bay was enormous. The ceiling was so high he could barely see it. Hundreds of beings moved around them. Most of them were not human. A tall blue creature with 4 arms walked past them. It had no face that Jake could see. Just a smooth blue head with small lights blinking on it. Behind it, a group of small green beings rolled on metal balls instead of walking. They made clicking sounds as they moved. This way, humans said. A voice. Jake turned and saw a robot. It was silver and walked on 2 legs like a human. But its head was just a box with a screen for a face. I am Guide Unit 7. I will take you to your quarters. Then I will take you to meet Council Representative Crex9. They followed the robot through long hallways. The walls were covered with symbols Jake did not understand. Some symbols glowed. Others moved like they were alive. Council meets. In 1 hour, the robot said as they walked, you will observe today. You may not speak unless asked a direct question. Why can't we speak? Lisa asked. The robot stopped and turned to look at her. New species must earn speaking rights. Humans are very new. You have been in space for less than 100 years. Most council members have been in space for thousands of years. Jake felt a flash of anger, but he kept quiet. He knew getting mad would not help. They reached their quarters. The room was small but clean. It had 2 beds, a table, and a window that looked out into space. Rest for 30 minutes, the robot said. Then I will return. When the robot left, Jake sat on one of the beds. This is going to be harder than we thought. Lisa sat on the other bed. They think we're just babies. Like we don't know anything. Maybe we don't, Jake said. I mean, look at this place. They've been doing this for thousands of years. We just got here. But we're not stupid, Lisa said. Humans are smart. We just do things differently. Jake looked out the window. He could see other ships coming and going. Each ship was different. Each one came from a different world with different people. I wonder what they all think of us. He said, probably that we're primitive, Lisa said. The files said most of them think humans are too emotional. They think we make decisions with our hearts instead of our heads. Maybe we do, Jake said. Is that bad? Before Lisa could answer, the robot came back. Time to go to the council chambers. They followed the robot through more hallways. These hallways were even bigger. The ceiling was covered with stars. But Jake realized they were not painted stars. They were real stars seen through some kind of clear material. How is that possible? Jake whispered. Advanced technology, the robot said. The council chamber uses quantum viewing to show real space above us. They walked through a huge door. Jake stopped and stared. The council chamber was the biggest room he had ever seen. It was round and went down like a bowl. In the center was a platform. Around the platform, thousands of seats rose up in circles. Each seat was different. Some were made for beings who sat. Others were made for beings who floated or hung from the ceiling. Humans sit there. The robot pointed to 2 small seats. Near the back, Section Z12. For new species only. Jake and Lisa climbed the steps to their seats. The seats were far from the center platform. They could barely see what was happening down there. "Welcome to the Galactic Council," said a voice that seemed to come from everywhere. "Today we discuss trade routes in the Vega system." Jake looked around. Most of the beings in the chamber were not talking. Instead, they were making strange sounds, flashing lights, or releasing colored gases. The air above the center platform filled with numbers and symbols. "How are they talking?" Jake whispered to Lisa. "I think each species talks. In their own way," Lisa whispered back. "The computers translate everything." A tall, thin being stood up on the center platform. It had gray skin and very large black eyes. When it spoke, the words came out as musical sounds. Odd. But Jake heard the translation in his ears. "The Zephyrian Empire objects to human inclusion in trade discussions. Humans lack the mathematical ability to understand complex economics." Jake felt his face get hot. The being was talking about them like they were children. Another being stood up. This one looked like a walking tree with silver bark. Agreed. "Humans have been in space for less than 1 century. They cannot contribute to discussions of galactic importance." More beings stood up. All of them agreed. Humans were too new, too primitive, too emotional. Jake wanted to stand up and say something. He wanted to tell them that humans were smart and brave and had good ideas. But he remembered what the robot said. New species could not speak unless asked a question. Lisa put her hand on his arm. "Stay calm," she whispered. "We'll get our chance." The discussion went on for 2 hours. Jake and Lisa just sat and listened. They heard about trade routes and mining rights and territory disputes. Everything was discussed with numbers and logic. No one talked about how the decisions would affect real people living on real worlds. When the session ended, most of the beings left quickly. Jake and Lisa sat in their seats feeling small and frustrated. "That was our first day," Lisa said. "Many more days like this do we have to sit through?" "As many as it takes," Jake said. But inside, he wondered if they would ever get a real chance to show what humans could do. They walked back to their quarters in silence. Tomorrow would be another day, another chance to prove that humans belonged in the galaxy. But today, they felt very far from home and very alone.